And welcome back, everyone. My name is Spencer, and welcome to part 3 of the TIE Interceptor kit bash build for the HobbyLink International 2022 Star Wars group build. My Central Air just kicked on, so the noise cancellation may make my voice sound a little scratchy, but it is what it is. But anyway, where I left off on part 2, I had just gotten the Interceptor primed and pre-shaded a little bit and was letting that dry, and I had done the prep work to paint the base. And I'll show that to you now real quick. Here is the base. I painted up. I'm using these big clamps here to act basically as like a stand so that I don't touch it too much. Once this has a chance to dry a little bit more, I'm actually going to buff it just to even out the finish a little bit. But I try not to make my bases too complicated. I don't obviously want to detract from the model. So there you go. Doesn't really get any simpler than that. And for that, I used plain old Rust-Oleum. Just straight up $4 rattle can Rust-Oleum primer than paint. I know some people don't like Rust-Oleum. Some people always have bad reactions with it, but I've never had too much of a problem with it to date. I just am really careful about my surface prep, and what I like to do is, as in the case with the base, wipe down the model or wipe down the surface with a little isopropyl alcohol after I give it a good wash. Then I use a tack cloth, which looks a little something like this. I got this at Walmart. It's kind of like a cheesecloth, but it has wax in it. Just enough to pick up dust and lint and other stuff, but not enough to leave behind a residue. And then just before I spray the rattle cans, I'll hit my surfaces with compressed air. But the other key I found with this stuff is to warm up the can. I have a big Super Size Me cup that I put hot water in, just hot tap water, and I let the cans soak or sit in them for about 5 minutes. Make sure they're really well shook, and then spray. How I normally do this with my bases is spray this, just enough to get coverage, wait about 10 minutes or so, spray a thin coat of this, wait about 5 minutes, spray another thin coat, and then leave it alone. This actually says you won't get full adhesion on plastic until like 5 to 7 days. I usually wait about a week before I do anything with it, before I even try to touch it too much. And it could take even longer for the smell to go away. It's kind of one of the downsides of this paint. It is more of an oil base, so it does take longer to ultimately dry. But that's how I do it. You'll probably be seeing me spray a lot of other bases with those paints, so I thought I'd just talk about that here a little bit. So while that's drying up, I'm going to go off and work on the Interceptor, get the hull colors and detail paints on it, come back and show you what I hope to have a nearly complete looking paint job. Not finished, but something that at least looks like it's nearing completion. So it's going to be the exciting part. So I'll be back in a sec. And I'm back, and look at what we have here. We have ourselves a mostly painted Interceptor. Really, the only thing I have left to do now is get the gloss seal, or let this dry a little bit longer, get the gloss seal on it, and then glue on these two bits. I went, and when I was looking at my reference photos, there is a surprising lack of accent colors or accent panels and little bits of accent color on the ship, especially compared to, say, the regular TIE, even the Vader TIE X1 and other variants. It's just not an overly like super fine detailed ship when it comes to the paint job. So what I'm going to do real quick here is attempt to adjust the camera focus. I tried testing this earlier, and the camera does not like trying to zoom into this because of these bits that get up near it, but I'm going to try my best. There we go. Oh, bumped the camera a little bit. So you can kind of see the slightly darker gray. A couple little accent panel colors there. Also the ion engine intake stuff going on. Turn it around here on the back. All that darker gray, slightly darker gray stuff has been hand painted. Hopefully you can see a little bit of the pre-shading coming through around the panel lines and whatnot as well. The camera's going to blow some of that out, just because I'm not too far from my light source on this, and it's going to wash out some of the gray. But yeah, the wings, they don't have any detail colors or accent colors. It's just solid blue-gray. So I figured, make my life a little easier by not getting too crazy with that. Just little bits of some of that darker gray. Here's the hatch, top hatch. Again, you can see little spots of color there. And then finally the main window, which is the darkest gray on the whole thing. It's not black, just a very dark gray color. And that is the Interceptor colors. Nothing really all that complicated. In fact, like I said, it was simpler than what I ultimately thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to have to do a lot of like panel masking and whatnot. I suppose if you really wanted to get super detailed with it, you could, but for this scale and this particular kind of kit, I figured I'd just leave it as is. Now, as for the actual colors, you know, I mentioned in the last video I was going to use Tamiya because they dry quickly. Also because I've learned how to spray them quite well. I'm not afraid or ashamed or embarrassed to admit that you know, I go online and I look at what other people have done and see what looks good. And I really liked the way this color looked online, and I think I hit that pretty good, or I nailed that pretty good. It's, you know, it's not too dark, it's not too light for me. It's got just enough blue in it. It's not ridiculously blue, like if you look at the studio model sometimes, but it's got enough to sort of give that sort of blue, blue-gray appearance to it. Especially, I like the contrast compared to the black wing panels. So, like I said, I'm not afraid to go online and look up what other people have done. Also because I don't have easy access to a hobby shop or arts and crafts stores. I have to order pretty much all my hobby paints online. So to try to save myself a little bit of time and money and headache, I like to, like I said, see what others have done and emulate that. But as for the colors that I went with, for the main hull color, I went with a mixture of two different Tamiyas. The first one was Tamiya Ocean Gray XF82. Can't really glare the bottle, is going to make that kind of hard to see. And the second color, plain old flat white. And the ratio is actually 1 part ocean gray, 2 parts flat white. So 1 part XF82, 2 parts XF2. And I like to thin that with X28 thinner. I don't really get any fancier than that. I go about 50-50. 50-50 paint to thinner. Again, Pache Talon, standard number 2 needle, which is 0.38 millimeter, close enough for all you 0.35 and 0.4 millimeter fanboys and fangirls out there, and just a little bit above 25 psi, somewhere between 25 and 30 psi. And spray's great. Clean out the airbrush with plain old hardware store lacquer thinner, and leave it at that. So, as for the accent colors, the dark window frame color is German Gray, XF63, which is a very dark, warm gray. I wish I could have found a smaller bottle because it didn't need that much. I wish I could have found a larger bottle of the Ocean Gray, because I got a feeling this is going to be a good TIE Fighter Gray for a lot of my other kits as well. I just got the big round 2 re-release of the Vader tie, and I got big plans for that kit. At some point, I do want to build that and make it look really nice and put lights in it and stuff. But I think I'm getting way ahead of myself there. As for the slightly darker little gray accents you saw, Vallejo model color 70.870 medium sea gray. Just put that on my little palette, my little ceramic tile, thinned it down with a little water, and just hand brushed that on. I really like model color as a hand brush acrylic. It's a good beginner hand brush acrylic paint if you're looking to get into that kind of stuff. There are better ones out there, but definitely one of the more beginner-friendly ones. But that's it. That's the colors that I used on the Interceptor. Again, the paneling is the Mr. Surfacer 1500 Black. Surprisingly simple paint scheme. So, anyway, that's the paint job on the Interceptor. What I need to do now is let all this dry for a little bit. Probably let it dry up for several hours, maybe overnight, and then I'll see about getting a gloss seal on it. So I'll come back and show you what that looks like. And the Interceptor has now gotten its gloss coat. All nice and shiny. I've also glued on the front window frame and top hatch. As for the base, I'm at the point now with it that it's dry enough to where I can pick it up a little bit. But if I hold it for too long or I have too much oil on my fingers, it can create a little bit of a glossy smudge, which is a bit of a pain to get off. So gotta wait for that to dry a couple more days. It's, just part of the game you play with a more oil-based paint like Rust-Oleum. But getting back to the TIE Fighter here, I first sprayed the gloss clear, and for that I used my tried and true Future Pledge Revive It Floor Gloss, as it's known, or as it was known. I contacted SC Johnson a few weeks ago. I asked about this, and they actually came back and told me that as of January 2022, this has been discontinued. I was the one that went over to Facebook and kind of broke the news as soon as I heard it. I know it can still be had in some places at near retail. I don't know how much longer that's going to be, but and I don't know if they're just doing a rebranding or a relabeling. It's entirely possible, but I don't know. Right now, I'm just assuming that it's gone for good. Thankfully, I've built up a little bit of a stockpile of it, so I don't have to worry about running out. It'll last. I have enough to last me, I think, pretty much for the rest of my life, or until this stuff goes bad, if it ever does go bad. I know some folks don't like Future. Some folks love it. I guess I'm more in the latter camp than the former. But what I do is I just load this up in my airbrush, spray about 20 psi, and do about 3 or 4, not misting coats, a little bit more than a misting coat, but not like a wet, heavy coat. Just 3 or 4 of those, and let that dry for a little while, let it self-level. I then usually take a little flat synthetic brush, and then any place where I don't think I got quite where I needed to with the airbrush, or a couple spots I just forgot about, I'll just lightly brush over it. There are a lot of folks who hand brush Future and get pretty good results as well. I'm not after a show quality finish here. This is more about just getting a seal on the paint to help protect it and also make it more receptive for a wash. I'll get back to that, but first talk about the window frame and top hatch. I super glued those on using extra thin CA. This is the Bob Smith stuff, and a glue looper. Kind of hard to see here on camera, but I don't use a glue looper all that often, but when I do, it is convenient. I think this is the version 4. Whichever one is meant for the thin, low viscosity glue. But what it does is it uses capillary action. You pick up a drop of it at a time, deposit a drop of it at a time, and again, let the capillary action draw it into your join or your seam. So if you got tight-fitting parts like I did here, and they're already pre-painted and glossed, and you don't want to slop too much glue around, then it's a really nice, simple way to do it. So I don't normally push project or push products and whatnot onto folks, but every now and then this does come in kind of handy, and it's designed just to fit on a standard hobby blade handle. But once those were glued on, I checked over everything, made sure everything looked good. Obviously removed all the bulk masking from the cockpit before I did that. One little thing that I decided to keep was the lighter color of this interior bulkhead. I know in a lot of reference photos and pictures that's actually a very dark, almost German gray-like color, but I wanted to keep it light just to make it a little different and also make that window frame a little easier to see. A little bit more contrast there. But aside from that, it's just a matter of waiting for this to dry. I'm going to give it a couple of days. Future self-levels wonderfully, but it does, in my experience, take a little longer to dry. Several hours before it's dry to the touch, and then usually at least a couple of days, if not longer, for it to fully harden. I can accelerate that with heat and dry airflow. I'm going to be using an acrylic wash on this. As I pointed out already, I'm going to be using this. This will be like the second time I've used this wash. The first time I used it was on the cockpit in a few spots. This is the first time I'll be applying it on the outside over a gloss. And putting acrylic wash over acrylic clear isn't necessarily a no-no, but it's better if you were to use oils. Oils and enamels over acrylics, and acrylics over enamels and lacquers. The reason why is that when you go to clean this up and you use acrylic thinners or alcohol, you could eat through the clear coat and then into your color coat, and you obviously don't want that to happen. But I can't use oils. I don't really have the time to wait for those to dry, so I need something that dries fast. If I'd thought ahead of time, I could have bought some fast-drying oils or fast-drying thinners, but I didn't think that far ahead, so I'm going to go with fast-drying acrylic. It just means I'm going to have to be a little bit more precise and careful and all that other stuff, but I'll talk about that in part 4, because part 4 will be the subject of the wash, the flat clear, and final little bits and details. So this is where I'm at with the Interceptor. I think this is a good place to call an end to part 3, which was all about the paint work. So with that being said, if you liked the video, please consider giving it a big thumbs up. Comment down below. If you haven't already, consider subscribing, clicking the bell icon. Big thank you to all of my current subscribers. It is very much appreciated. Any form of support for the channel is very much appreciated. And until the next video, which will be part 4 of the Interceptor Kit Bash, take care, stay safe, and happy modeling. Bye-bye, everybody.